We're using food as a coping mechanism. We're using food to shove down, numb, or distract or avoid from feeling certain emotions or feelings. And often we're afraid to feel. We haven't been taught how to feel. And we have just been taught to be in this society of numbing and being distracted and shoving everything down. And chasing these, what I call these quick fix dopamine highs. And that's another thing that fuels these behaviors is we're chasing this, 2, maybe 3 minute quick pleasure, this quick euphoric reward.
Welcome back to the Clear Skin Chronicles, everybody. Now, I'm really excited for today's guest because this is a topic I've been really wanting to delve into, and I definitely wanted to bring an expert in to be able to talk about it in a more in-depth way. We actually see issues with emotional eating, binge eating, food fear, sabotage quite often with our clients in the Clear Skin Solution, especially dealing with acne. So we brought in the expert today. We have Amber Romaniuk, and she is an emotional eating, digestive, and hormone expert with 11 years experience helping high-achieving women create a level of body confidence, intuition, optimal health through power mindset healing, self-care, overcoming self-sabotage with food. And this is going to be so great for our audience because this is things that they deal with on a daily basis. And what I really love that you do, Amber, is you work through addressing those key negative thoughts, patterns, and limiting beliefs that are keeping women stuck where they are and not having that progress for decades to come. And I'm also really excited because you are a podcast host yourself from the No Sugar Coating podcast, which I love the name of. Over 2 million downloads, over 500 episodes, and listened to in 88 countries. That is awesome. I love that.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here with you both.
Yeah, I know it's been a topic we've been really wanting to dig into. And when I came across you, I was like, yes, this is going to be the perfect person. And what I think is so incredible is you have that story, like so many of us health practitioners do, emotional eater after gaining and losing more than 1,000 pounds, which I think a lot of people who emotionally eat can relate to, spending over $50,000 on binge food, spending 5 years balancing hormones, digestion. And now you're able to help women do that with your body freedom.
It was quite the journey, and it just helps you be in understanding and relatable, right? Just like the skin journey or hormone journey or whatever the journey is. So, yeah.
So let's start with an easy one just to kind of lay the groundwork, Amber, is what is really the difference between emotional eating, binge eating, and food addiction? Because a lot of people use these interchangeably.
There are different spectrums essentially. So, I like to kind of coin all these different relationships with food, an emotional relationship with food. We're using food to cope, regardless of if you're emotionally eating, binge eating, or have a full blown food addiction. We're using food as a coping mechanism. We're using food to shove down, numb, or distract or avoid from feeling certain emotions or feelings. And often we're afraid to feel. We haven't been taught how to feel. And we have just been taught to be in this society of numbing and being distracted and shoving everything down. And chasing these, what I call these quick fix dopamine highs. So with emotional eating, well, just actually with all of them, you're eating for any reason other than physical hunger, you are emotionally eating. So emotional eating can be anything from I'm stressed, I had a bad day, I want a little bit of reward, I'm bored, I'm lonely. There's many potential triggers, and you may have a few bites of something. You're not actually physically hungry. Or it could be like I eat a half a chocolate bar, I eat a bag of chips, and I want a cookie. And then where we get into kind of the shift between emotional and binge eating is I often find with emotional eating, you're eating maybe smaller amounts of things. Maybe you feel a little uncomfortable digestively or you feel a little bit full, but the binge eating is where we get into the full loss of control with food, where you start eating something and either you're so addicted to it that you can't stop because certain food ingredients and products are designed to make us addicted and give us massive dopamine highs, among other things. So we literally cannot stop. And then the other big component of binge eating and full blown food addiction is there's this, what I call the inner critic, the ego mind, this all or nothing mentality that once you have that first bite or you quote unquote have that bit of indulgence, this voice kicks in and is like, you've messed up, you've screwed everything up, your diet, your gut's gonna be unhappy, your skin, whatever it is, you suck. So you might as well just throw the towel in for today or the week and try again later. So it really fuels this all or nothing mentality to where I'm like, I'm gonna eat all of this now, get it out of the house, or eat all of it to get it out of the way, and then I'll try again tomorrow. And so it really fuels that all or nothing. And I find with binge eating, you're eating until you're so full you're sick. Some women will purge. I did go through a period of that myself to where you think, oh, well, it's okay. I'll just purge afterward and it won't, I won't be full or bloated. I won't gain weight. When in fact, that is even more destructive behavior. And the purge is really a lack of ownership of wanting to deal with what I just did with the binge. And then full blown food addiction is just this full-blown asphyxiation with food, and often it's tied to body, tied to weight, tied to self-worth. All levels of emotional eating are stem to a root of, "I don't feel good enough." And so essentially, you're either thinking about obsessing, planning your next diet, your next quick fix, and or you're completely losing control and planning your next binge, your next emotional eating episode. But essentially, your thoughts are consumed about 90% by food, by weight, chasing numbers, things like that. And there's this desire for perfection with food in your body, but then there's this full blown, like, I don't care. I'm going to throw everything out the window because that didn't work, and then go and rebel and eat all the things I wasn't allowing myself to have. There's often an asphyxiation as well. It's like calories, weighing, measuring food, being a slave to the scale, like chasing the number on the scale and tying that to our worth. And I just find it literally overtakes your mind, and it's hard to be present going about your day and enjoying anything because you're just constantly thinking about food, or I don't look good enough. I weigh too much. I don't want to go on the vacation. I don't want to see these people. I don't want to go out. Like, I went through all of this, and it literally impacts every aspect of your own being and then your life.
Yeah, it really does trickle into everywhere, right? Especially when you have the body issues, the lack of confidence. And we see that, right, Chris, with our acne sufferers all the time. And Chris, when we're dealing with our clients, what do you see is the most prevalent between those three options, the emotional eating, binge eating, food addiction?
I think one is it's hidden. Under food addiction is when we ask them to eat more or reintroduce foods. So what we do, Amber, is inside the program is we're going to eat by this protocol for this set of time with this supplement, these lifestyle connectors. And then what we're going to do is we're going to merge and we're going to reintroduce. And a lot of the times there's food intolerance, there's triggers, there's histamine. So we're really trying to nurture the body and calm it down, reduce that inflammatory reaction just to give it concept. So outside of that is when we say, okay, you know what? And it's completely outlined. They have it there. That could be a 16-week protocol and they see exactly what they're doing every single week. As soon as it comes to add or gift in themselves nutrients and minerals, what if my acne comes back? And that's where that food addiction, almost a reversal of the food addiction, is they are hyperfixating. And that's what I see the most. I mean, for sure, we have disordered eating clients, we have emotional eating, we have confident pieces, right? These are some of the behaviors that come with it, binge or anorexia, orthorexia, like we've seen it all. However, the most, I want to say, damaging by pattern that I see is the reversed. And I always say reverse. It's still a food addiction, but I call it the reverse food addiction because it's fear based on I don't want to go back.
Thank you for sharing that. A big thing that I see and why I feel that happens is the women haven't fully learned to trust their body. They're thinking, oh my gosh, if I add this thing back in or I make this change, like God forbid that happens. And so there potentially is a lack of self-trust in their body. They're not attuned yet. And or there's still a lack of self-worth to build on a deeper level, right? Because I went through that whole thing, orthorexia, cutting foods out, try and balance my digestion. But every time I tried to restrict, I always ended up back in binge eating or self-sabotage with food because I didn't address the roots. And that's where I think any form of, if we're not addressing the roots, whether it's mentally, physically, emotionally, energetically, at some point we're going to be revisited with the same triggers, the same fears, the same insecurities until we're really willing to look at them and face them and really work through them.
And so would you say that there's multiple roots where these behaviors can come from?
Yes, 100%. So some of the biggest roots stems a lot of from childhood. So as an example, when I was 5 and I went on the bus the first day, the older boys called me fat and ugly. I took on that identity for the next 20 years of my life, made me very insecure in my body. My mom had a food addiction that I realized she had once I healed mine that I kind of inherited partially from her. And it's not her fault. It was a way of coping. She had multiple sclerosis, and I can't imagine how you would deal with that, not being equipped at all with a doctor or anyone that's going to give you suggestions and things to help in any way holistically, just saying, oh, well, sorry, you're just going to have to deal with this for the rest of your life, right? So there's all these things that can accumulate from a young age, not feeling good enough, feeling like I had to deal with everything myself. I didn't want to burden my parents, trying to process through witnessing your mom decline with an illness that you can't help her with, right? So there's all this emotional stuff that I kept hanging on to, and food was always available. And I think that's one of the things as kids, either potentially your parents could have like been chronic dieters and you're observing them all the time, getting on the scale, tracking their weight, tracking their food, going on diets. They're putting you on diets at a young age. They're poking at your stomach, commenting about your weight. you're too skinny, you're too big, right? All of that has a significant impact on our psyche and our subconscious mind and our level of worth. Maybe it had nothing to do with weight when you were a child. Maybe it was your parents going, oh, a B plus, that's not good enough. Get an A plus, and then you get more praise, right? And so then you're thinking, I have to try and be perfect or prove to get praise and love and acceptance from my family. Or another big root I find, aside from perfection and unworthiness and body image, is people pleasing. So if you were taught from a young age, oh, you put yourself last, family's first, you're selfish, and it's frowned upon if you make yourself a priority, you're going to take that on and you're going to end up on last on your list, overbooked, overwhelmed. And that is an easy way to use food as a coping mechanism because you don't have time or feel worthy to prioritize your needs. And so it's like, I just need a quick break. Let me take a bite of something. And then that can quickly escalate. So I do find that obviously there can be more significant traumas and things that, people go through. But usually these are some of the biggest things that I've seen with my clients and in my own upbringing where I inherited some of it and then it was always available and it was just part of growing up. I think as well when we get into our preteens and our teens, I mean, I was I think, last generation before like phones and social media. And I'm so grateful that we didn't have that. We had dial up internet when I was, in junior high. So it was like kind of a blessing. But body image tied to Hollywood, media, magazines, all the photoshopping that we're not told about. And then we're comparing ourselves thinking there's something wrong with us because we don't look like all the edited photos. And so I think that whole preteen teen conditioning of I don't have the perfect body, there's something wrong with me, just hits our self-worth even more. And then they create the problem, which is the body image dysmorphia. And then they create the fake solution, which is, oh, here's the diet, here's the quick fix, here's the pill, here's the injection that you can take to resolve and fix this and quote unquote have the perfect body when it's literally just keeping you disconnected from your worth and really feeling, a sense of self-worth and confidence.
It's so insightful, everything you just shared, because it can really truly start in childhood. It can develop as a preteen. It can just get worse as a preteen. And do you ever see that people are also using food as a reward? Because when we are children, we're like, oh, you got an A on your math test. Here's an ice cream cone. Oh, you did really good at the dentist. Let's go and get a treat. Using as that, again, that dopamine, that reward system.
Yeah, 100%. All the time. Food used as reward, especially from a young age. And then as adults, we start to go, oh, I had a bad day. I'm going to get XYZ. I had a great day. I'm going to celebrate with this. Or,
Treat myself.
yeah,
The words, oh, I treated myself to a glass of wine, or I treated myself to a donut, or I treated myself. And the word treat, as I always want to go back to that, food addiction, emotional eating, depends on the context of what they're using. And I didn't mean to cut you off, but that just bam, right there, right? That's a big one.
or if they've been more conditioned in the fitness industry, the cheat day. I can eat whatever I want today. And then it turns, they're enabling a full day of binge eating pretty much. And then tomorrow I have to go back to restriction, right? So some of the words are so heightened to the emotional connection we create with them. I think the other thing too that I witness with my clients, and you probably see this as well, is they'll start to gain momentum on their healing journeys, whether it's less binge eating triggers, their bodies start to release protection, their skin starts to clear, something starts to improve. And then they're like, oh, I want to reward myself. And there's still their old wiring in the brain is to reward with food. But there's this deeper underlying subconscious, I'm not worthy for long-term success. I'm not worthy to fully heal. I'm not worthy to have it all and fully step into the woman I've always dreamed of being. So there's this like underlying subconscious sabotage of using food as a reward. And then they either lose control with food again because they're not enough along in the progress, or they feel guilty, or it triggers that all or nothing or some kind of shame or guilt. And then they end up bloated and puffy or whatever the thing is. And then they're like, oh, see, I know I'm not worthy to fully heal this. Look at, I'm just proved to myself that I'm still struggling, even though that's like part of building the self-worth. So I see a lot of like sabotage reward because we need to build the worth more to help them feel worthy that they can actually have it all.
I'm really big on pattern, protection, identity. So you've said these as well. I don't know how many times a day I say this. What is the pattern that's being exhibit? Because when you take yourself and you can identify a pattern, you disassociate. And then there is not that self-worth anymore that we can kind of cling on, right? And I love the identity because you said, I took on the identity that I was fat and ugly. And that's choice. And once we understand that it's choice, now it comes down to programming and pattern again. And I love what you're saying because even coming up from the eating aspect, this is not just eating. This is a trifecta that goes multifaceted, especially weight, skin, hair, anything aesthetics. I could say instead of emotional eating, I could say emotional discontentment, binge eating. We could say overeating, right? And fixation with addiction. So it doesn't matter of whatever industry, but I will tell everybody listening right now, if you have an external ailment, quote unquote, I promise you there is something deep seated, that pattern or that identity. And when we allow our mind to slow down or reduce the inflammation, or when we step back and we disassociate and we start watching the patterns, that's what I call opportunity.
100%. And I think the other big piece that we're not taught about and educated about is the way the brain chemistry and the brain is wired. And so, like for me, one of my biggest struggles was I'd be good through the entire day with my food, and then the evening would come. And even if I didn't want to binge, I'd feel this strong pull and this strong urge. And I'm like, what the heck? And then I started learning about how when we repeat the same pattern over and over and over for weeks, months, years, it's literally that time of day when we get there, that pathway is going to light up in the brain. And it's essentially going, oh, it's time for you to do this. And when I started to realize that, it blew my mind. And I think this is just so important for the listeners. Like the way your brain is wired is going to dictate the habits you feel drawn to. And that's another reason why you're continuing to come back to these behaviors, is because you've innocently wired this pathway in your brain. And also, when we consider starting to change this and addressing those roots and those patterns and all of these things that we've essentially created to be a comfort zone for us, the brain, specifically the amygdala in the brain, which is the stress center of the brain, is like, discomfort? What? No, this is a threat to your survival. And it essentially wants you to stay in your comfort zone. Even if you're suffering, you're struggling, it's not working for you. So I think understanding that the brain is going to continue to want you to revert back so that you can have that awareness and go, discomfort is okay. I'm safe. There's no bear coming to attack me. It's okay if I feel discomfort through this. That's normal. It's my brain trying to keep me alive. Right? And that we can understand the wiring of the brain, understand that we're chasing a dopamine high, and all these different layers that make it feel so easy to want to give into the food and harder to fight it in the beginning. It helps us not feel crazy, and it helps us have some more power and awareness. And like you said, I think awareness is one of the biggest superpowers when we're doing any healing, but especially on this journey, because if you don't know, there's just this constant cycle of negative self-talk, beating yourself up. I don't have enough willpower. I'm not trying hard enough. And it's got nothing to do with willpower or trying harder with your food. It is so much deeper than that.
Or being lazy.
Oh, yeah, totally.
That's another word.
Oh, big time. There's so much emotional charge to that word. And I think we've just, are in a society where you're praised for hustling and pushing and like ignoring yourself and not prioritizing your needs. But that's what's created the epidemic of illness in North America and doesn't work. And that's one of the biggest things when I'm trying to get my clients to slow down and start looking at triggers or build a self-care practice, regulate their nervous systems. The level of shame and guilt that comes up, and that ego voice is going, yeah, you're lazy. What are you doing? Like, you should look busy. And then we have to work through the discomfort of, clearing out the shame and the guilt that is so deep rooted inside as well. And then you can have shame and guilt post binge and emotional eating because you just did that again, right? So it's very much as we rewire our self-worth and we rewire our habits and patterns, now what we start to experience is it feels bad or wrong or uncomfortable to not prioritize me needs, to not take ownership, to not work through the trigger. And that's the cool thing about the switch flipping when we get on the healing journey, is now all the old behaviors are no longer familiar, safe, and comfortable. They're now, you have gratitude and compassion for what you've gone through, but you've rewired to the other side.
I truly love this because think about chronic pain, right? So Kay's experienced chronic pain. I spoke to a client today, chronic 6 years of pain, and the good days and the bad days. And when you get the chronic pain, you feel like you failed. You feel like everything you've done, and now you're back here. And what did I do? And I've done all this and I've done all that. And how can I be back here? And it's that treachery that we just replay and recycle in our brain, right? And this person said to me, I had a painless day that I haven't had in 6 years. I reverted the next day. I said, what did you do in the time that you weren't in pain? And it was said, I cherished it. And I said, and that's all we need to do. So now that that person has had that moment to be pain-free, I said, where was your mindset? Where were your thoughts? What were you thinking? And by the end of the day, it was like, I was so miserable. And I said, oh, interesting. Why? Because this is everything I've been missing out at. And I said, okay, now see the pattern. So we have to just remind people that when you have good days, you don't have any flares and your skin is flawless and you like it. You know what? You did not grab that donut, which is your vice or something like that. These are the wins that we have to capture every single day. So some people track their pain management because, usually when you're doing pain, that happens. So they'll track their pain. And I said, I also want you to track your wins of the day. Anything where you didn't have to go into your coping mechanism, anything where you didn't have to utilize your breath, anything where you didn't have to go in and tell yourself you're safe. So if I was able to walk into the bathroom and not pick my face, that's down there. Because with these patterns as well, especially with food, because it's ingrained in our society, you can't go to someone's house without bringing a dish. You can't go to a barbecue without, it's everywhere. So these little shifts of these pattern changes. And like you said, in order to identify, you do not only just have to recreate the pattern, because that's easy, everyone. That's just so easy, right? The thing is you take out the static. So we have to change the foods we're eating. We don't have to always rip foods. We have to change the foods because those might have been a trigger. And whatever it is. And I don't mean to hog this. I just wanted to go because I know the people that really listen and resonate. And you're speaking the language because I'm on the calls with them. And do you want to talk to how this disrupts hormones, especially with women?
I would love to. And I'm so glad you said everything you just did. And again, it is about awareness and seeing patterns. One other thing I want to add, because I've gone through my own experiences of significant pain. I went through an experience where all of a sudden I had a horrible flare up with my urethra, like horrible, felt like I had a UTI, stabbing pain every day for like a couple of years. It was horrible. So it's like anyone who has pain or discomfort of any kind, my heart goes out to you. It's so debilitating. But it was a mastery for my body because essentially the more I reacted to the pain, the worse it got, the more I suffered. And so what that whole experience really taught me, because it's resolved now, was okay, when this comes up, let me find my breath and let me try and stay as regulated as possible, because then it's not going to get worse. And then I learned how to start talking to my body. I talked to the pain. I started talking to my urethra and I'm like, why are you upset? What's triggering you? What is this about? And it was a blessing to go through that experience because I learned how to talk to my body on a whole different level. And then she was able to start telling me and guiding me, like, you're being too tolerant. Stop doing this. You need to let go of guilt and shame that are held here. Do this. Don't do that. And it was like, I listened right away. I did not waver because the sooner I shifted, the sooner the pain would go away. So I think there's such a power just starting to talk to your body, talk to the skin, talk to the digestive system, talk to the pain, whatever it is, and start asking like, what messages do you have? Why are you here? Because your body is so wise and you will hear her talk. I'm telling you, she will speak very clearly to you. And then you'll start to understand that we all have this gift of learning this body attunement. So I just wanted to share that because it's such a superpower to just build the muscle of talking to your body.
Absolutely. It's such a powerful thing because you're right, is when you do take the time to listen, your body will talk back.
Yeah. She holds all the wisdom.
She really does.
Even when you're in pain or the acne, your body is still talking. So I always say, what conversation do you want to have? Do you want to have the conversation about the acne, or do you want to have a conversation about the triggers and the supporting mechanisms and the alternatives so that you don't have the acne? Because either way, we're having a conversation. We talk to ourselves a lot throughout the day, right? We're constantly talking to ourselves, especially acne people. You cannot go into a bathroom without looking in the mirror, I promise you. And now, watch your words. What are your words telling you? Bring them back. Bring them back to your coach. Let's talk about those words, right? Are these words accurate? Or is it how you're feeling? Because you're right. We are not taught in order to express emotion. We are taught to repress emotion because it's a weakness. And there's a difference between, like, Gen Z is getting really, really good at this, where they are not really tolerant of this. They're like, listen, I don't like you. You don't like me. We still have to kind of be, social. So we'll smile, we'll say hi, but we're not friends. Like, what a concept. That's okay, right? Geez, bananas. Can't go with the Xers. The Xers are like, this is the way we got to do it. This is the way I have to handle it, right? All of these things. But the generational gap is also part of that precondition, and then you take a parent that's an X and you take a kid that's a Z, and what happens? You have a disconnect, but again, you also have an opportunity for learning. So, yeah, I just love what you're saying.
Likewise, it's so nice and refreshing. Yeah, so with hormones, there's a huge connection between both emotional and binge eating fueling hormone imbalances and hormone imbalances fueling and becoming binge and emotional eating triggers. Do you have a preference of which side I start on?
You pick whatever you feel best. dealer's choice today.
Yay. Okay. So I want to start with how hormone imbalances can become emotional and binge eating triggers because obviously I had my wide array. So at 24, I had cortisol levels 10 times higher than they should have been. Still the highest rate I've still seen to this day in my practice. I was flagging postmenopausal. I had hypothyroid. I had elevated inflammation. My digestive system was a mess. I had all this stuff going on. So I totally can understand it's not fun having hormone issues. And so when I started to heal it, I started to learn about how these imbalances were actually triggering my self-sabotage. So the first one I want to talk about is cortisol, your stress hormone, which is produced by the adrenal glands in just above your kidneys. They sit on the kidneys. And this is the biggest, most common hormone imbalance I see. And it's often not looked at enough. A lot of doctors aren't even testing for it. Oh, adrenal fatigue, that's BS. It doesn't exist. And it's like, well, yes, actually, it's a real thing. Anyways, so one of the biggest issues with cortisol is like we've been talking about this whole episode, you're overbooked, you're overworked, you're last on your list, you're highly stressed, whether it's your skin, your body, your weight, whatever the things are, and you're constantly in a stress response. And so 80% of my clients have high cortisol where it's obviously elevated, and then about 20% are in burnout where it's gotten too low. But either way, the biggest ties to binge and emotional eating here are increased appetite levels from higher low cortisol. So it's like you can just keep eating. And that, of course, is going to be a huge trigger. You have increased cravings for processed salt, processed carbohydrates, and refined sugar. So the bigger your cravings, the easier your desire to want to give in. Also, with cortisol issues, we have blood sugar spikes and drops and blood sugar irregularities. So if you wait too long to eat and you're getting hangry, dizzy, faint, lightheaded, shaky, right? Pale, all of a sudden you have a surge for sugar and caffeine cravings. It's just so much easier to grab the first thing you can find to not make it necessarily an intentional choice. And then that could trigger the all or nothing. Oh, I just ate that thing. I wasn't planning on it. Day is ruined, right? And then from a fatigue standpoint, fatigue is such a common sign of a cortisol imbalance or exhaustion. And when we're tired, not only we produce more of what's called ghrelin, the hunger hormone that gives us a hunger signal, we produce less leptin to make us full. And then we also, when we're in a fatigue state emotionally, we're just like, I don't care, I'm tired, I'm going to eat whatever I want. So it really fuels that I don't care mentality as well. And you have brain fog, you can't think clearly, you feel puffy. So you may get on the scale and it's gone up a few quote unquote pounds, but it's retention. And that can trigger you to want to binge or emotionally eat because now you're frustrated that the scale is not moving. When if you haven't addressed your hormone imbalances, like they have a significant impact on your metabolism and your body's ability to release weight easily. So it's the first hormone imbalance I see that has a big role in this. The second is low progesterone. So of course it's one of our sex hormones. And if we have low progesterone, we actually cannot produce enough GABA, which is one of our hormones that helps us fall asleep. And of course, if you're having trouble sleeping, there comes the fatigue. Actually, if we don't sleep well, we don't produce enough dopamine. Our mood can be lower. And of course, we want to reach for that mood boosting reward food, right? You're tired. There's that I don't care. I'm going to eat whatever I want, increased appetite levels. Also, because of the low GABA and our progesterone also plays a role in helping produce serotonin, one of our mood boosting neurotransmitters. It's really a stable mood neurotransmitter. When that's low, we have a higher likelihood of getting into binge and emotional eating behaviors because we're craving more sugar, more carbohydrates, and again, our mood is lower. And there's just, again, we've been conditioned in society to chase reward, whether it's online shopping, alcohol, scrolling social media, eating, whatever your vice of choice is. But low progesterone definitely plays a role. And then I see thyroid. So primarily hypothyroid, which is the sluggish underactive thyroid, become a trigger. And one of the biggest reasons for that is because when your thyroid gets sluggish, it's very connected to your metabolism. Your metabolism slows down. You actually lack a hunger signal. So a lot of my clients that have hypothyroid or thyroid issues don't feel hungry, especially first thing in the morning or through the first half of the day. Some just never feel it. And so they're skipping breakfast and or skipping breakfast and lunch and they're not eating until later in the day. They're having blood sugar crashes and then they're overeating or binge eating in the evening because now they're so hungry and so ravenous. So there's a tie with that. And then the other tie with the hypothyroid is because your metabolism can be more sluggish and it can feel harder to lose weight or for some women next to impossible until we get the thyroid properly supported. There is that really big weight body battle. How come I'm eating clean? I'm exercising. I'm doing all the quote unquote right things. The scale isn't moving. In fact, this week it went up. And all the anger, the frustration, the self-hatred, the self-loathing, what's wrong with my body, like that anger that we can project on our bodies because they're not morphing and moving in the way that we want them to, not losing the weight the way we want them to. That in itself will give you such a big, cortisol spike and make your body want to puff and protect. And so to understand what a role the hormones play in potentially triggering emotional eating, and then, of course, the latter part of that, which is how these behaviors with binge eating, emotional eating, restriction amplify hormone imbalances as well.
You're so right. Like the hormone imbalances trigger the emotional eating, but then the emotional eating impact your hormones.
It's so connected, and we're not taught about this. So, with emotional and binge eating, it's quite similar. One of the first imbalances I see is the cortisol stress hormone issue because most of the women are, waking up on a fasted stomach, going to the gym in the morning, not eating, trying to burn as many calories as they can to try and lose weight. There's still this chase for weight loss or aesthetically looking a certain way, still that root of unworthiness. And again, they're very booked. They've got families, they've got careers, businesses. Like, I get it. There's so many priorities on everyone's plates these days. But the binge and emotional eating, the overconsumption is so stressful on the digestive system. We feel so much inflammation in the body, and any kind of stress in the gut or overconsumption, we have to expend so much energy breaking that food down. And inflammation all is going to put your body into a stress response among the stressors you're already trying to deal with. And so I see cortisol levels 2, 3, 5, 7 times higher than they're supposed to be. And then for some women who've been in this for years or decades, you may have had high cortisol where you're fatigued, you have trouble falling asleep, afternoon energy lulls, abdominal weight gain, your face is puffy, you have those cravings for sugar and salt, brain fog, you can't remember anything to save your life. You're putting the cereal in the fridge and the milk in the cupboard kind of deal, right? Anxiety. People don't realize anxiety is such a common sign of high cortisol, the increased appetite levels. But these are some of the signs of this imbalance. And if we're trying to chase a certain number on the scale and then we're using food to cope and then we're trying to restrict to compensate, you're just going to skyrocket that so easily. And then what I often see that comes next is that hypothyroid, that sluggish underactive thyroid. And so what happens is we have higher low cortisol long enough. The body and the brain specifically is so overstimulated, and the brain is your first detector of stress. And we have a gland called the pituitary, and if it gets overstimulated by all this stress and inflammation and this high cortisol, it's responsible for producing something called thyroid stimulating hormone. And that is one of the hormones that is involved in your thyroid function. And if that gets too high, your face gets puffy. It's hard to lose weight. You get constipated, muscle aches and pain and joint pain. You have more anxiety. You don't feel like yourself. Your cycle can be heavily impacted. Your fertility is not as good. Hair loss, eyebrow thinning. Your skin feels drier than like a sanded board. These are some of the symptoms, the brain fog, heavy fatigue in the morning. You don't feel like yourself when you have a thyroid issue. I can attest to that. And, it's so frustrating if you're trying to lose weight when you have a thyroid issue that hasn't been properly supported because things are sluggish. That's the best way I can describe it. And then you definitely have less of an appetite level as well because things are slowing down. And then as well with that stress in the body, the thyroid itself produces T4, and then that's converted into your active hormone T3. And I often see both of those to be low or one to be low, and then you have all the symptoms I just mentioned. It's very rare to see hyperthyroid, which is where it's overactive. It's 90% have the hypo. And someone will end up in Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is the autoimmune. And a big parts of this are the self-hatred, suppressed anger, suppressed frustration. Like you said earlier, Cris, like suppressing all this emotion and not expressing it plays a huge role in these hormone issues. And it's a big reason I feel many women have hormone imbalances because they've not been moving this negative emotion out. They don't have healthy ways to cope. They're afraid to feel, or they've been shamed that it's weak to feel. And the more that builds up in the body, the more it overwhelms your nervous system, cortisol, thyroid. And then the last big one that I see is going to be an imbalance with progesterone and estrogen. Some women will have testosterone issues. Some women will have low DHEA, which is a steroid hormone the adrenals also produce. I feel like blood sugar is a whole other aspect as well. They can have insulin resistance, high hemoglobin A1C, which is a pre-diabetic marker, high blood sugar, low blood sugar. Obviously, that can be all over the place. And just remember, we can resolve these things and balance them. They're not like permanent, just in case you guys were worried. But yeah, so with estrogen, progesterone, what happens is when you're in your cycle years, Ovulation is how we produce the majority of our estrogen and progesterone, and then we do produce smaller amounts via the adrenals. Testosterone is one of our converters from DHEA, so adrenals produce DHEA, it's converted into testosterone, some estrogen, and then as you get into perimenopause and menopause, postmenopause, once you stop ovulating, the majority of your progesterone and estrogen, obviously in smaller amounts, are going to be produced by your adrenal glands. So I see a lot of women with low progesterone and estrogen because their bodies are so stressed, they're not ovulating properly, and or because their bodies are so inflamed, their egg quality is really poor. And we need good egg quality to ovulate properly and produce enough of those hormones. And there's also something called the progesterone steal. So we can have really high cortisol, the adrenals are stressed, and some of that material that we would need to convert into some progesterone via the adrenals is actually stolen to produce more cortisol. And that can really tank those levels. We need enough thyroid hormones to produce progesterone. So often I see depletion, and some women, though, end up the opposite, where their estrogen gets far too high. Their progesterone stays low. It's called estrogen dominance. And so the more toxic load you have in the body, the more chemicals and fragrances you're using constantly, the more candida, mold, fungal, like you guys probably talk this all the time, all the gut bugs that shouldn't be in our bodies that are, heavy metals. These are the kind of internal environmental factors that can potentially skyrocket estrogen levels too high. And then we gain weight more easily. We feel more puffy. We have more mood imbalances. And I find that between the mood imbalances of any of these hormone things I've touched on, or the body putting on what feels like weight, which to me is potentially a lot of retention as well, we get reactive, we get upset, we get triggered, and then we try to punish with diets, and then we punish with overconsumption. And this is why I always say, like, it's not your fault that you're struggling with this and that you haven't been able to overcome it yet. Like, were we taught any of this? I didn't know any of this until I started my healing. Like, we're not equipped.
No, we're still at goldfish and lunch boxes. And even just the progesterone steal, because that whole term has been like morphed and stuff, is just remember that GABA, right? So when we don't have the neurotransmitters in balance and we don't have the GABA, then progesterone really just does not have that shot. So then we go into the neurotransmitters and we're like, hey, buddy, come help us out. And then GABA's like, oh, okay, until we deplete that too, right? So then really what the body does is, and this is all back to childhood, right? It's called coping and it's called stealing. So where the body will show up for you day in and day out, it is in there like nobody's business. I mean, Tesla's got nothing on our body, right? But our bodies don't naturally want to give up on us. It's our brain, it's the wiring that gives up on us. So just remember that every single day that you wake up and you get an opportunity to change something is another day you get an opportunity to listen, to become very, how about empathetic to yourself? How about self love, self worth, self gain, self strength? Because we want this for, say, our children. We want this for our family members. We want it for ourselves. I just ask people, what is it that you don't think you deserve? Because it comes down to those emotional triggers that, again, not everybody knows self worth. When you say, well, what's your worth? Huh? Well, my worth is that I do this and I do that. And it's all tangible. But what is it that you deserve? And I am not kidding. I have been on calls. And when I ask people or I let them know that you deserve things, what is it that you deserve? I get tears instantly because it's not that I've upset them or intentionally gone and tried to provoke something. It's been sitting there. And that's just the body's way to say, oh my gosh, somebody hears me. Somebody loves me. Somebody, understands me, or I feel seen. Working holistically and working with coaches that truly, and I have Hashimoto's, so I know that whole stress response. And because I can look back at that, I always say, like, the people that have suffered through it truly do not come back to educate and coach and train because it can be painful. It can be emotionally jarring for us too as we work through things. But we do it because we have such compassion and we never want another soul to suffer with what we did. Right? So please take our lessons, please take our triumphs, please take our struggles, because we're totally willing to offer them to everybody when you're open.
When you're open, I think that's the key. And you can't force or make anyone be ready for this. It's really like I had to get to the low point moment of binge eating out of my garbage in my dumpster in the back alley to be like, oh my goodness, like I can no longer sit in this denial that it's not a big deal and like everyone does it and it's okay. Like, no, it's a big deal. I need to figure out why I'm doing it. But the grace and the compassion are everything. And we don't give ourselves enough of that. And we rely too much on other people to give it to us, and I think that's one of the ways society's being conditioned to give your power away, right? "Oh, I'm worthy if I have a certain amount of money in my bank or a certain car," or, like, "I need to chase validation from others," and that all keeps us disconnected from going within and building the worth within. Like, nothing outside of you can make you feel worthy. It is truly an internal job, and that's why I'll talk to women who go, "Yeah, I felt like having a child would, like, help me heal binge eating because I thought that I would just love myself enough," or, "I thought getting this job or, like, making this change would do the trick," and I'm like, "Celebrate all those incredible things in your life. However, this is a you and yourself inside job, and nothing external will fix it for you."
So, Amber, you've said so many good things, and I know there's women out there listening be like, "Oh my gosh, this is 1,000% me." For those women listening, where do you really recommend they start this journey? Because it can be so overwhelming to think, "Oh my gosh, I have all of these things I need to do." What are those first couple key components you recommend they go with?
First off, try to not be so hard on yourself. Try to let go of some of the shame, the guilt, the embarrassment. You're not alone. It's not your fault. And if you're even willing to like just open up and tell one person that you feel safe and comfortable talking to about it, I think that can be so empowering. I think the next thing is starting to become aware of what's actually triggering you because until you're aware of your triggers, they're going to keep kicking up. And remember, your triggers are teachers. They're just trying to show you where you're out of alignment with something and they want to bring you home to yourself on a deeper level. So start a list. If you have to put it up in a few rooms of the house to remind yourself, start doing so, but be willing to dedicate 5 to 10 minutes post trigger or even when you're triggered before you give in. Why am I triggered? What's going on? What is this about? What's been going on the last few days? How have I been feeling? It's liberating. And then I think the next one is, start asking yourself before you go to food, is this physical hunger or is this emotional? Because they're very different. And as you start to really get to know the difference between your physical hunger cues and your emotional, 9 times out of 10, you're going to start going, this is emotional. Now, what is going on? Right? So I think those are some great places to start and start building a self-care practice. Start dedicating even 5 to 10 minutes to yourself a few days a week and build from there because you have to be willing to dedicate time to starting to go within and build awareness if you want to shift or change or heal anything that you're trying to work on. And you need to put time into it. So I think those are some great places for people to start on their own and then find resources, podcasts, workshops, like things where you can start building and understanding it on a deeper level. And then you get to decide from there whether you feel you want to do it on your own or if you want to reach out for some form of support.
Where can people go to find more information about what you do? Because I'm sure everyone listening is like, "Oh my gosh, she is speaking my language." So, where can they check out the podcast? Where can they check you out online?
Yeah, so the podcast is the No Sugarcoating Podcast, and it's available on all podcast apps and the website. The website is amberapproved.ca. If you're wondering if you're struggling with binge or emotional eating, there's a free quiz you can take. And then if you're wanting to like delve into some more resources about this, there's some great things you can check out on the website as well. If you want to book a consultation and connect for support, you can do that as well. It is available and complimentary. And then I'm on social, and it's my name, Amber Romaniuk, ROMANIUK on Instagram and YouTube.
I love it. Thank you so much, Amber, for coming on today. This was such an incredible talk, and I know so many women out there got so much from this.
Well, thank you for having me. I really, really enjoyed it.
We loved it.
Let's end with this for one little nugget here. True hunger is when your tummy growls. When you hear that gurgle, gurgle, that is true hunger. So that is your little leverage. That's your piece. That's your like, am I gurgling or is there something else going on? So yeah, thank you, Amber. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Words of wisdom today, everybody. We'll have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next week on another episode of the Clear Skin Chronicles.